Halo, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Dina Syari'ati Citra Pertiwi. I'm from E1 class. So, today I will read a story from the book of Life and Teachings of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, entitled Arabia Before Islam. Okay, I want to start the read Arabia Before Islam. With an area of 1,020,000 square miles, the land of Arabia is the largest peninsula in the world. It has the Red Sea to the west, the Arabia Sea and the Gulf of Aden to the southeast, and the rivers Euphrates and Tigris and the Persian Gulf to the northeast. It thus occupies a unique position. It is situated in Asia, yet only the narrow Red Sea divides it from Africa, and by just passing through the Suez Canal, one reaches the Mediterranean Sea and Europe. It is stood at the center of three continents, yet it is apart from all of them. Arabia being a very hot and dry country, one third of it is desert. It is strange that a land surrounded by water on three sides and with only a narrow strip of land to the north has practically no river of its own, except for small streams here and there, which soon dry up in the hot desert. Rain too is scarce. The rains come in torrents in spring, but the water does not stay. It is lost in the sand as quickly as it comes, there being no dependable rainy season, which is necessary for agriculture. This wasteland, about 1,000 kilometers wide and about the same in length, is neither fertile nor cultivable. Yemen, the original home of the Semites, is the only exception in that it is fertile and enjoys a rainy season. Besides this, the rest of the peninsula consists of barren valleys and deserts. Due to the lack of vegetation, life here can be only that of the desert. The camel, the only means of transportation, is indispensable, for a desert life demands continuous movement. The desert dwellers must continually go in search of pastures, which are scarce and thin and soon crop bare. Mm. The pastures turn green around spring, watered by springs which form in the wake of occasional rainfalls. In such an infertile country where no agriculture has ever been possible, the only product is drought. In the context of this civilization, Yemen has always been very developed in terms of agriculture. Showing great intelligence, the Yemenis invented ways of saving rainwater from running down to the sea so that artificial irrigation could be carried out. Moreover, they built the famous Dam of Marib, by changing the natural course of the water. This water is gathered in a 400-meter wide valley between two mountains by constructing a dam with gates at the narrowest point in the valley. Then this water is divided into many streams and spread over a wide area of plains. It is almost like the Nile in the dam area in Upper Egypt. In this way, they have contrived to have a controlled distribution of their water. The fertility of their land has gone on increasing, and the people of Yemen have become very prosperous. Makkah, when Hajira's infant son started crying for water, she ran desperately between the holes of Safa and Marwa in search of water. She ran 7 times when finally she discovered a spring of water, gushing from the ground by the side of her son. It was this spring which is known as Zamzam. Makkah is founded at the spring spot of Zamzam. As Makkah and Medina were, and still are, islands in a sea of desert. These towns were initially inhabited by the descendants of the nomads who still retained many of the desert-born habits of their ancestors. Situated in a valley, Makkah is one of the oldest cities in the world. It is a desert with no vegetation, no dead palms. There are some fertile spots in the desert which are called oases. There are also springs of water here and there. Also, grass and palm trees grow. The springs of water are scattered all over the desert. Large as well as small clans settle around the oasis. Maka signs and sign times was an important center for the caravans coming from the south with valuable merchandise. They brought gold, precious stones, and spices from Africa to Yemen. From here, it was taken to the markets of Syria, Egypt, and many other places on the backs of camels. The merchants traveled in caravans for the sake of safety. For in those days, caravans were an easy target. Since these caravans passed through vast, vast stretches of uninhabited desert, it was easy for plunderers to rob them of all their merchandise. At Makkah agriculture not being possible, the city thrived on commerce. Makkah became an important trading center because of the sanctuary, the Kaaba, to visit which people come from places far and near. Its geographical position was very good for the point of view of trade. It was situated at the crossroads of the roads from Yemen to Syria and Abyssinia to Arabia. So the nomads came to Mecca from all sides. By the 6th century, Arab traders had become very influential and controlled the trade from Yemen to Syria. Taif. was also an important commercial center, but Makkah was more important because of the Kaaba. So Makkah became a religious as well as financial center. By the time the Prophet conquered Makkah, we find many influential traders who were adept at doing business with different parts of the world. Also, Yemen was the most advanced province in the Arabian Peninsula because of its water research and sound administration, Makkah a religious center wielded greater influence on this account. Makkah, a focal point of pilgrimage dating back to the origin of Arab history, owed its status to the Kaaba, which had been built by Ibrahim and Ismail. Everyone observed its holy mount for religious reasons, as well as on account of the special position it enjoyed with regard to trade, being the capital of the peninsula. The Arabs of the north are considered Arab al-Mustariba, Arabized Arab. The Qahtanis of the south are considered Arab al-Mutariba, or tribes resulting from mixing with the Arab al-Ariba, original or true Arabs. From the Qahtanis descend the Arabs of ancient South Arabia for Humaite kingdoms, the completely true Arabs. Descendants of Aram, son of the Sem, son of Noah, are called the Arab al-Baita, the lost Arabs. Their identity having been submerged in that of other peoples. The progeny of Ismail were known as Mustariba, or naturalized Arabs, and they greatly multiplied. They were divided into many tribes and clans. The Quraysh, the large tribe, descending from the Kinana and Ismail, had several clans. They were settled in Makkah by an ancestor of renown called Qusay, who displaced the previous inhabitants, the Khuzah. The clans who lived in the vicinity of the Kaaba were considered most honorable. These were called Quraysh al-Bisa, or the Quraysh of the Halal. The location of Makkah on important caravan routes across the peninsula, and the prestige and the Kaaba in the age of Iqra range or Jahiliyah gave it great advantage as a trading city. This is why the Quraysh became one of the richest and most powerful tribes. This, together with their descent from the Kinana and Ismail, gave them claims to an aristocratic preeminence. The Prophet Muhammad was of the Banu Hashim clan of the Quraysh, who lived in the vicinity of the Kaaba and enjoyed great honor and prestige in Arabia. These clans were divided into families. Besides these Arabs, there were also Christians and Jews who lived in Arabia. A large number of their population lived in Medina. In Arabia, there are two different geographical types of soil markedly different from one another: the oasis and the desert. The inhabitants of Arabia naturally fall into two main groups: nomadic and settled people. The city dwellers settled in one place and lived on cultivations because they knew how to till the land and grow corn. They engage in commerce not only within their own country, but also abroad. But the Britons, being nomads, disliked the idea of settled life and wandered from place to place with their families and belongings. Perfidy in his book The History of the Arabs writes, the Bedouin is no gypsy roaming aimlessly for the sake of roaming. He represents the best adaptation of human life to desert conditions. They live in tents and possessed goods, camels, and horses. They were continually on the move in search of pastures, and when they halted temporarily, they lived in tents or camps. They engaged for economic reasons in horse breeding, hunting, camel racing, attends. They thought that these were the only occupations worthy of men. They disliked agriculture, trade, and commerce. In the desert, the basic unit of life is not the state but the tribe. The Bedouins attach the greatest importance to total freedom for the individual as well as the tribe, but this was not the case with the city dwellers. They attached importance not only to freedom but also to peace, security, and prosperity. Another feature of tribal life is the belief in absolute equality. All the members of the tribe are treated equally. This is because of the influence of the desert with the freedom of its vast limitless expenses. If they had any injustice forced upon them, which they could not bear or confront, they left behind their pasture and moved on to another place where there would be no injustice, only freedom and equality. In times of conflict, they depended upon to the sword. It was considered as a prerequisite for the individual to be able to define himself and his tribe. Nomadic life is a best often start breeding, especially the breeding of camels. There is some rain in the winter season and then some vegetation comes up in the low-lying areas. These areas become a paradise for camels as they provide the best pasture, but with the coming of summer, the pasture finishes. Then the nomads move on in search of other green areas in order to feed themselves as well as their camels. Then there are some wells which provide water for the camels, the milk of the camels of the diet of the nomads along with dates, which are obtained from the oasis. Cereals are not easily available. Only the rich can afford them. The oases that are found in Medina are near the mountains, so the date crop is grown, and in Taif, which has very fertile soil, cereals are grown. Medina has the largest of the oases. Ibrahim was the first to teach the worship of one God. The Arabs followed the religion of Ibrahim for some generations, but their later generations tended to divide from the straight path shown to them by Ibrahim and become idolaters. At the time of the birth of the Prophet, the whole of Arabia had taken to idolatry. Some of the tribes worshipped stars and planets, some stone idols, and the Kaaba, which had been built for the worship of God, became a century of idolatry. It housed 360 idols, one for each day of the year. Hubal was the most honored. Carved in red stone, it held seven arrows in its hand. Among the Arabs, lots were drawn to decide all important matters. The Quraysh were the most influential tribe in Makkah. Most of them were engaged in trade, and some of them were great traders. The name Quraysh is derived from a word which means to trade. Since the Quraysh was the largest and most powerful tribe in Makkah, Isif was the most influential man in Makkah. The, character, the characteristics of the Arab people. Islam emerged in a region known as Hijaz, inhabited by the descendants of Ismail and Banu Kinanah. These people had access only to limited research, limited habitable area, cattle, pasture, and oases. Everything was in short supply, so they could afford to lead an extremely simple life. Due to these constraints, they often waged war, sometimes to take possession of the limited reservoirs of water and pastures. Nevertheless, these Bedouins had noble human qualities, for they lived very far from the artificial world of civilization. The atmosphere of nature served as a vast school of nature of them. They never let the artificial life of the cities, and their life was devoid of all formalities. The extremely simple, austere life made them realists. All this was responsible for producing in them the qualities which the Arabs call al-muruwah, manliness, which meant to them acknowledging the truth, speaking nothing but the truth, fulfilling promises, honoring obligations, supporting the oppressed. Boldness, noble character, patience, generosity, and hospitality. When this high level of humanity was combined with the truth of Islam, they were enabled to perform great feats. It was this truth which has been thus expressed in a hadith. Those who were good people in the days of ignorance will also be good people during Islam. In Azerbaijan Arabia, despite their battles, wars, conflicts, and tensions, their force of revenge, which went on for generation after generation, their mentality, their thinking, their aptitude for acknowledging the truth were fully preserved. For instance, once in ancient Makkah, the groups were ready to fight. At the juncture, Abu Sufyan ibn Harb intervened and said to them, If you watched a war, so many people would feel guilt belonging to both groups. So thought I know tell you something better. They agreed with him. Then Abu Sufyan said, "What his passage is passage? No, you must make peace." But the parties accept his advice there are then and made peace. This was in spite of the fact that there were people who used to go on fighting for as long even as 50 years to avenge a murder or an insult or any injustice done to them. To the paucity of economic research, there were people who indulged in looting, but even these people were of a noble character. Once a Bitcoin wanted to rob a woman who was all alone in her tent decked with jewelry. But he did not enter the tent. He stood at the door and commanded her to take off all her jewelry and I and hand it over to him. While the woman was taking off her jewelry, the man stood at the door with his back towards it, so that he did not catch sight of the woman while she was taking off her jewelry. These Arabs had not been idol worshippers since ancient times. Idolatry was only a later introduction into their lives through foreign influence. The idols were imported into Arabia, so there was no ideology behind this idol worship. It was thus of a superficial nature, having no deep ideological or philosophical root. For instance, once an Arab wanted to take revenge for his father, so he went to an idol called Dul Halasaf for divining a rose. But the answer that came from the idol was not in the affirmative. This enraged the Arab, and addressing the idol, he uttered the words, "Oh, Dulhalasa, had your father been killed, you would never have uttered this falsehood that the oppressor should not be punished." Similarly, another Arab led his camels to his idol set in order to seek its blessing. It was a tall idol and was covered in blood due to the sacrifices made to it. On seeing this sight, the camels were frightened and ran away. When the Arab saw the flight of his camels, he hit the idol with a psalm abusing him. "My God, destroy you! I had come to save you, blessings, and you made my camels run away." Of these ancient Arabs, there were a sizable number who were known as Hanif. These people were truth seekers, and they shunned idolatry, the life and love, social life. They used to say, "Oh God, I do not know how you should be worshipped. Had I known, I would have certainly worshipped you in that manner." The circumstance of the ancient Arabs and their moral qualities had a close affinity with Islam. These people, true in nature, were as a potential convert of Islam. Therefore, when the Prophet of Islam began his preaching in 610, The Hanif took no time in responding to his call and became his devoted companions. Abu Bakr ibn Abu Quhafa being one of the Hunafa. What distinguished the Arabs from others was that they could not afford to reject a truth when it had become clear to them. That is why, in the initial stage of the Prophet's call, due to some misunderstanding, a number of them turned against the Prophet Muhammad. But when finally they learned that what the Prophet was telling them was nothing but the truth, they took no time in entering the fold of Islam. There are a number of incidents in the books of Sirah of this event. Thus, the sending of the final prophet was not without reason. It was a well-planned decision of God, which he in his own knowledge decreed. These Arabs were the living people who were selected by God to lend full support to his final prophet so that he might fulfill the divine mission. Okay, thank you all. Thank you guys. I think enough. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bye bye.